What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bass. In today's video, we're talking where do bass go in early spring and how to catch them. Are you guys ready to be warm yet? Man, I am so excited I'm looking forward to this warmer weather and really starting to think about that spring transition. With that comes, where do I fish? What do I do? What do I throw? So that's what we're gonna talk about today. You know, here in a few weeks, we'll do a more in-depth, like, spring fishing time. Where do these fish go? But today's video, we're gonna cover, the different types of fisheries and kind of get you thinking where these fish are gonna be going, because it's only a couple weeks out. And depending on where you are in the country, you might already be a little bit late, but these fish are gonna be on the move. Now is the time to get out and get fishing. Now is the time where you have one of the best chances of the entire year to catch your new personal best. These fish are on the move. They have that spawn on their brain and they're gonna be feeding up. So don't wait for the warm weather. Get out now. That's my number one tip. Get out now and get on these fish. That way you can pattern them and stay on them through this transition that we're gonna talk about, or at least mention today. And then, like I said, in that later video, we'll really cover that spring transition. But early spring, if you haven't winterized your boat, if you haven't, hopefully you've been fishing all winter. You know, I feel bad for you guys up there with ice still on your bodies of water, but hopefully you guys have had the boats out or been fishing from the bank, or maybe even doing some ice fishing and catching some fish all winter. But I'm ready for it to be warm. These fish are ready to be warm, and they're ready to be active and aggressive, and I am excited. So the spring transition, early spring. You know, we're kind of still in winter. It's still cold out. I took my jacket off, found a spot in the sun so I could kind of defrost, but these fish are going to be moving, especially if you get these late winter, early spring storms where you get that really warm rain. Really is going to warm that water temp up really quickly, and those fish are going to be on the move. A lot of times they're going to race right to the back where that warm water's coming in. You can get them with a spinnerbait, you can get them with a chatterbait. We're going to talk about that here shortly. But just be thinking about the weather patterns, thinking about the water temps, and thinking about these fish moving, right? Where do these fish go? So let's talk about the different types of fisheries real quick. I'll give you some key things to think about, or at least some features that will help you decipher what type of fishery you're on. And then we'll talk about the best ways to catch them, the best baits. The baits I got rigged up right now, and some baits right here. My confidence baits to help you guys get more confidence, have confidence as you get out for the 2024 bass fishing season. All right, fisheries. Let's talk about, so we talked about the transition, right? We talked about the fish are starting to move. They're in that that mindset, right? They're looking to start thinking about that spawn. Most of these fish are gonna be heading to the backs of bays, spawning bays. So some fisheries, that might be 50 yards. Some fisheries, that might be a mile or more, right? These fish are going to travel. And if you've been out fishing, you've been out winter fishing, and you've been on a great bite, these fish can ghost you, right? They can be on the move overnight, and all of a sudden you're left wondering where these fish go. So we'll talk about the fisheries. We'll talk about the different types of fisheries and how these fish like to move, and we'll cover that. So Highland Reservoir. Typically, that is your really tall dam, really narrow dam, really tall though, because it's typically damming up some kind of river canyon. You're gonna have long river arms, you're gonna have steep banks, bluff walls. Sometimes you'll have, with these storms coming in, you'll have lots of water movement, lots of current. Those fish are gonna be moving from the main body to your main lake points, and then going to your secondary points. They're gonna use those points as like stepping stones along the way to get back into the closest spawning bay, something that's a little bit less sheer, something that's going to be maybe facing the sun for more hours of the day versus that bluff wall, so the water is going to be warmer. Maybe it's got a creek in the back where when you get those warm spring rains coming in, it warms up quicker. But that's where those fish are going. They're going to be moving, like I said, along those points to get back into the bay. So start on your main lake points. You've probably been catching them all winter out offshore, on rock piles, on humps, that sort of stuff. Now you're gonna be fishing your main lake point, the point that separates the two river arms, or separates the main body from a river arm. And then you're gonna work on those secondary points, those little smaller points that work your way back into those bays, and those fish are gonna go jump from point to point to point. Now, with that said, and this applies to all of these fisheries, the small males move first, right? They got a lot of work to do, right? They got to get up there, they got to find a spot, they got to find an area to make their bed, right? Their area, they're gonna bring in these big females. So if you're on a body of water that you're familiar with, or maybe you're not familiar with, but you at least know kind of the average fish weight, or you pay attention to tournament results and you know that typically it takes 12 to 13 pounds to win a tournament and you're catching 8 to 9 pounds, understand that if you just backtrack just a little bit, those bigger females will be staging a little bit behind the males. So you're probably catching males as they come up into the shallows and they're working their way to those bays. If you're catching smaller than average fish for your fishery, try a secondary point back or two, and you'll probably run into those staging females. Another thing that can kind of mess up this transition for you, so say you're on those fish and you're on that Highland Reservoir and you have them dialed on this secondary point. Well, then you get a cold snap, a few nights of just cold weather, not rain, right? It's not pulling them to the backs of those creeks, but you just get that cold front comes through, kind of shuts down the fishing. Understand that these fish don't really ever backtrack. So if they're on a certain point, they're not going to go back out to that main lake point or out to the main body. They're just going to sit on that wherever they were and kind of lock down. They'll shut down, but you might have to finesse fish for them or wait for that weather to stabilize. But those fish will turn on eventually. But just understand that you haven't lost them. They're still there. You just have to fish a little bit differently for them. So Highland reservoirs, we talked about that. Again, short dam or narrow dam, tall dam, because you're damming up those rivers. Again, lots of water fluctuation. When you get these early spring storms, sometimes these reservoirs, the water levels are going to rise, right? They might rise 10, 15 feet in a week or so. They can bring in a ton of water. So be prepared for that. If you get that water movement, move to that warmer water. If it is muddy and cold, stay away from that. That is that's the stuff I stay away from. Cold, muddy water is one of the hardest things to catch them in. But if you can find some clean, warmer water, or just some stained warmer water, you should be able to catch them. We're going to talk about baits here shortly. Lowland reservoirs, same type of thing. You're going to have less river arms, you're going to have less bluff walls, but you're going to have more high spots and island tops and saddles out on the main body. Typically the bodies are wider, they're more of like a bowl type main body, and you're going to have a lot more humps and saddles. Hopefully you can find some creek channels that are close, that are going to be taking you back into those nearby spawning bays. You can follow those just like a highway. Those fish are going to line up and they're going to stage along that little bit deeper water, that creek channel, and head into the back. River systems, here, Tennessee River, you can see behind me, water levels dropped, right? We have winter pool where they drop the water, they crash it, and they keep it low just in case we get those crazy storms that bring the water all the way up. But a lot of the backwaters, those fish have pulled out because the water levels have dropped. Same thing with your your highland and lowland reservoirs, if the water levels have crashed, those fish are going to pull out of those bays. If there is some creek channels and deeper water nearby, they might be on the ledges there. But here, they've pulled out of those bays and they're right there on that main river channel, just at the mouth of the entrance to the big backwaters. And they're going to sit there right on that break, that main river break. They're going to sit right there, wait for that water level to come up, and then they're going to start their movement to the back. So again, lots of movement. Depending on the fishery you're on, these fish can move 50 yards, they can move a mile or so. So understand that you have to try and stay with these fish along that process. Natural lakes and ponds. Natural lakes, again, typically there are a lot less features in those types of fisheries. Typically there's not a lot of contour lines or anything like that. You're gonna have some really subtle breaks, and that's where your fish are gonna be. They're gonna be on the little 1 or 2 foot breaks out there in a little bit deeper water, staging on those breaks, and they're gonna get ready to move in waves up to those bays, up to those protected bays, those warmer bays. As far as ponds, again, guys, we're keeping it really simple. In today's video, we'll do a more in-depth video here shortly, but as far as ponds, you know, all winter you've probably been fishing over by the dam or the deepest water in your pond. Just think that these fish are going to be moving shallow. So I don't know if you're fishing a park pond or you're fishing a neighbor's pond or a golf course pond, whatever it may be. Hopefully you have an idea of how that pond lays out, and now you're going to work yourself a little bit shallower. You know, you might actually come into some grass depending on water temps, but from those deeper water out there by the dam, work shallower. Maybe there's a creek or something that feeds your pond, you know, work your way towards that. Hopefully it's not a long walk for you or a long paddle, but that's where those fish are going to be moving. Okay, so we kind of talked about the different types of fisheries. We talked about the kind of, you know, what to look for. Baits, man, it is reaction time. It is reaction fishing time. It is time to cover water. Again, I've mentioned it multiple times in the video. You have to stay with these fish, and they're going to be moving, right? It's boom, 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 and they're moving. I've literally seen with my eyes waves of fish swim past the boat. You know, they're on a mission, right? They've got one thing on their mind, and they are going. Hopefully along the way, they have a second thing on their mind, and they want to eat. But hopefully you can stay with them depending on the type of fishery. Hopefully that helps you guys. But baits, it's all about covering water. I mentioned earlier, if you get one of those warm early spring storms and that water that's coming in is warmer than the water temp on the main body, head to the back and throw some kind of spinnerbait, okay? I'll link all these baits down below in the video description, but like the River to Sea Bling, white on white, got the little nickels here, little chartreuse action. What else do I have tied on? My other favorite ones, little Megabass SV3 chartreuse and white. A real compact, nice spinnerbait. You don't have to put a trailer on it, but these fish, when that water's coming in, I mean, they'll put their nose right up in that current, and you're throwing the spinnerbait up there. You can throw a square bill. You might be able to throw a jig or something, but I like something with some flash, something with that I can move that's fairly weedless. So that spinnerbait, you know, I'm throwing it right up there in that current because those fish are sitting there enjoying that warm water. It's bringing nutrients to the fishery. It's bringing food to them. So that spinnerbait is a must, okay? If you're not on that situation, you don't have that rainwater coming in, there's a bunch of other baits I have here for you. I got all sorts of baits. So we talked about spinnerbaits. That's one of the keys if you are fishing that water coming in, that current coming in. But now you really get to kind of pick, how do you want to fish for these fish, right? Do you want to throw a big glide? Do you want to throw a big paddle tail swim bait? Maybe you want a crankbait or a square bill or an A-rig. I mean, personally for me, you guys know, maybe you don't, I love throwing the A-rig. I love covering water. You know, having something with a little bit of flash, especially in that dingy water, the A-rig is my #1 go-to. It's just something that I enjoy fishing. You guys probably see a lot of fish catches on it throughout the year for me, but right now is when it really shines. You know, that's our mini rig, our mini flex rig. There's been a lot of confusion lately about our micro rig we just came out with. The micro is considerably smaller than the mini. We've had guys comparing our mini to other small rigs, but the micro is a lot smaller. This is a true like 2.8 size A rig, whereas this is a 3.8 to larger. You can throw 4.3s on there, but something with some flash. But that is the little micro. That's that rig that we just came out with a month or so ago. But throwing an A rig with some flash on it. Again, we designed these rigs with some lighter wires, a lot more movement, so you can get real active with it. But you can cover a lot of water. Again, it's all about finding these fish and staying with them as they move. So the A-rig for us, or for me, it's key. Again, that's that little micro rig. If this thing really shines, if you are on one of those highland reservoirs or lowland reservoirs with clear water, maybe you're on a spotted bass fishery, downsizing your rig, downsizing the wires, your line, everything, this thing just get munched. So that's the little micro rig. Again, not to be confused with our mini flex rig. That's the micro flex rig, okay? I mean, this basically fits in the palm of my hand. It is a lot smaller than the mini rig. And the mini rig is smaller than our tactical flex rig. We have 3 different sizes. So an A rig, though, not to digress, an A rig for me is one of my best ways to cover a lot of water. I have a ton of confidence in them. Again, it's there's a lot of technique to it. It's every 5 or 6 handle turns, add a rod twitch or a reel twitch to get that whole school pulsating like a real school of shad or bait fish, and that's the key. But again, you're covering those main leg points to secondary points, working your way in the back. Maybe you're following that creek channel. That, for me, is my #1 bait. #2 bait, some kind of speed crank. Again, we're talking cold water, so we're talking speed cranks. Again, love this bait. Tactical DD. That is our crankbait. The Megabass, the Deep X300, the Deep 6, there are some really good cold water crankbaits, but speed cranking right now all the way through the pre-spawn, hopefully you've been doing it all winter, it is go time for the speed crank. Again, burn, 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 pause. You guys have heard it for years. That is a must. Again, having that pause, it's something you can't really do with the A-rig, right? You're down there deflecting, you're burning it, 7 to 8 gear ratio reel, you're burning this thing fast, and then you pause, and that thing just backs up or stops in that fish's face, and they have to eat it. It's triggering that core feed response. So that is a must, the speed crank. If you're a little bit shallower, or maybe you're in that situation where you're up in the back of that creek where that water's coming in, a square bill, right? So if you're a little bit shallower, a square bill, that Bill Lewis, that ATV, the River to Sea Biggie, has a nice sound to it. I like chromes and reds this time of the year, just like the deep crank, or we're all fouled up here, but chromes and red, bait fishy and red, that is kind of my deal this time of the year. It just works. I keep it really, really simple. Again, with that water coming in, sometimes it's murky. You might have to go with a white base or a chartreuse, but for the most part, my reds and my bait fish colors are kind of that 1-2 punch for me. What else? Again, it's power fishing time. We've talked about it. Talked about that. Haven't talked about this. Chatterbait. If you find yourself in that same situation, again, a chatterbait works great in moving water. It works great around a lot of good hard pieces of cover, right? As these fish transition, as they're moving along that transition into that spawning bay, they're gonna stop on those hard pieces of cover, the structure, right? So the wood, the docks, the rock piles, all that sort of stuff. And the chatterbait, fairly weedless, right? Treble hooks on your crankbaits can get hung up, but that chatterbait just works extremely well. Some of my favorites, you guys know that I love the jackhammer. I've loved that thing for years, right? There you go with the spunk shad on there. But the new Z-Man, this guy right here, this thing is sweet. They got the painted blades, they got the coated blades, electric, they got some really cool colors. And for half the price, it's a really cool new chatterbait by Z-Man. Again, we'll link that stuff down below in the video description, but they put a lot of time and effort, I think, in this thing, and it shows, because that thing, the startup speed, it fishes a lot like the jackhammer, and again, just some really cool color options with blades, painted blades, coated blades, and then some really cool colors. But a chatterbait works really well this time of the year, especially if that grass starts growing up. And then if you were on a fishery that has a ton of like debris or wood in the water, that little cross eyes chatterbait that has the weed guards is another great one to try out. Again, I'll link all this stuff down below in the video description, but I just want you guys thinking about this stuff. You know, it's still cold here. Chickamauga, it's still cold. We had ice on the water just last week. I mean, it is still cold, but it happens quick. What else do we got? Jerkbait. If you find those, that standing timber, or you find those dock pilings or tree stumps or whatever, that structure that those fish are stopping on along the way, especially now with forward-facing sonar, it's pretty hard to beat something that you can suspend in their face and really drive them crazy. The Vision 110, you guys, that's a staple for me. The 110 Junior +1, the 110 +1, those are my favorite jerkbaits, especially in cold water. As we get some warmer water, we head into spring, we'll be able to throw a little bit more aggressive jerkbaits. But that guy right there, being able to suspend those things in that fish's face on those key pieces of cover is it's a must. So a jerkbait's always tied on for me this time of the year. And then as far as big baiting, glide baits and swim baits. If you are a true big bait fisherman, you're a guy that's wanting to catch the biggest fish in the lake, you need to be throwing some kind of swim bait, either the glide or the paddle tail. As the water warms, you're gonna start off throwing the wedge style tail, right? Either the Huddleston or the Savage Gear. See that wedge style tail? That's for colder water. It's got a lot less kick, a lot more subtle kick. And then as that water warms, you can go with the boot tail. You turn those the right way. Boot tail style tail. Either the burrito, that thing is an awesome fish catcher. The mag draft, either the 6-inch or the 8-inch. It's a great swim bait to throw. But again, you're trying to catch the biggest fish on the key spots. Those guys right there will get the job done. But just think about it, guys. We're talking early spring. It feels good to be sitting in the sun. Got a big cloud bank coming, so it's gonna get dark here shortly, but it's been nice to start thawing out and start thinking about springtime. Again, these fish are gonna be on the move. They've been winterized, right? They've been out there kind of doing their offshore deal, but now it's go time. They got that spawn on the mind, and they're gonna start moving. Again, it's important for you guys to cover water, stay with those fish, because it's easy to get ghosted this time of the year. Those fish are gonna be on the move. But these are my favorite baits. Again, depending on the different types of fisheries, you're gonna have to catch them a little bit different ways, but understand that warm water coming in, those fish are going to the back. If you get a cold couple of nights, those fish aren't going to backtrack. They're gonna kind of stay where you've been catching them or where they've been at. And then if you're catching smaller fish than average, work your way a couple steps back and you'll find those bigger females. And hopefully, you know, this is not your first year doing this, so you've had a little bit of history and you know those key areas on your fishery where those fish are gonna stop. Hopefully you guys have done a little bit of research either on Google Earth or got out when the water was low and you found those stumps or those trees or lay downs or you know, cars, whatever it may be, that structure that's normally submerged, now it's visible. Hopefully you waypointed some of that stuff, because those fish are going to use that along the way as they start working their way to the backs of the spawning bays. Guys, down below in the video description, I'll link some of my favorite baits, colors, all that good stuff, just like normal. But again, just wanted to get you guys kind of thinking about that pre-spawn and early spring bass fishing. If you guys have any comments, please leave those down, or any questions, please leave those down in the comment section. I'll try to get those as soon as possible. But looking forward, I'm excited to an awesome 2024. Hopefully you guys are too. Again, that sun feels good. It feels good to warm up. Those fish feel the same way. They're gonna be on the move, hungry, and looking to spawn. So should be a good 2024. Hopefully this gives you guys the confidence to get out there and get out on the water. Again, don't wait for this warm weather. Get out as soon as possible and start finding these fish. That way you can stay with them all the way through the spawn. Guys, as always, thank you for watching. If you guys like this video or learned something from it, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys on the next video.